As Americans, we automatically obtain the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those three goals embody the American dream, which so many people move to our country for, and those rights are being infringed. Physician-assisted suicide is illegal in 42 states, and euthanasia is illegal in all of them. America is allowed to decide when someone wants to die, which controls their right to life and their right to end their life. But currently, the government is allowed to decide when that's happening. For people whose quality of life is decreasing every single day, euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide is often the best choice. Every family has a family member which dies of old age or of terrible diseases like cancer, and sometimes near the end of their lives, it becomes too unbearable for them to live. In worst-case scenarios, where someone goes into a coma or a vegetative state and they're unable to make the decision for themselves, a lot of family members have to go through the difficult decision that they need to end the life of a close family member, because it simply is no quality of life to live in a bedridden state. In the case of Miss Velma Howard in 1995, her husband and son were charged of a Class B felony for assisting in her suicide and by administering drugs for her because she wanted her life to end. She was suffering through ALS, which is known as Lou Gehrig's disease, and which shuts down the neurons in the body and eventually kills them due to asphyxiation because they cannot do anything about their state. Near the end of her life, she could not control her arms or legs and was unable to kill herself, and so she asked her doctor to do so, but she was unable to because of the state she lived in. 3 days after filming a video where she just said that why she wanted to die, she had committed suicide through the help of her husband and son, who were later released but were charged for a felony. Using euthanasia on animals, the decision of the Vacco v. Quill of 1997 case, and capital punishment, I will argue that euthanasia should be legal in all states upon very strict guidelines. Firstly, a primary example of the intricacies of the U.S. government is the judicial branch. In the case of Vacco v. Quill of 1997, the Supreme Court decided against the legalization of physician-assisted suicide in the United States. Before diving in, I will give a brief distinction between physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia. Physician-assisted suicide is when a physician gives a lethal dosage to a patient for them to administer themselves, and euthanasia is when the physician gives the lethal dosage themselves. The difference between the two is physician-assisted suicide is suicide, while euthanasia is technically murder, and it is when a physician is doing it, or a healthcare professional who signs the Hippocratic Oath to avoid doing all harm. This very weary attitude is very understandable and is a lot of the contradiction between the legalization of euthanasia, but for a lot of people like Ms. Velma Howard, they're unable to commit suicide and to administer the drugs themselves because her arms were not working because the neurons were shot, and so euthanasia would be the only option. But alas, this case is for physician-assisted suicide. The most atrocious statement that was given by any of the Supreme Court justices was by Justice Stephen Breyer, who said it is not one's fundamental right to choose one's nature of death. By stripping one's right to death away, the government is stripping away our right to control our own lives, which simultaneously takes our right to liberty and to our pursuit of happiness, because they are simply looking for an out because their life is not happy anymore. Ironically, the government doesn't allow citizens to be able to take their own lives, yet the government allows themselves to take the lives of others. Capital punishment is a prime example of the United States controlling our lives, claiming that it is for the safety of ourselves. If all Americans have the right to life but not the right to death, then the government's ability to dish out capital punishment is extremely hypocritical. I believe the capital punishment is necessary because some people are too dangerous to be left alive, but it is very hypocritical for the government to decide that capital punishment should be legal, but euthanasia should not be illegal. Similarly, it is unfair that when good people want to die, it is illegal, but when bad people don't want to die, the government gets to decide. Often the controversy with this allows people of impaired mental states or through coercion to kill themselves, which is a very simple fix. Physicians should simply be able to make the distinction and do an autonomy test to see if someone should be allowed to take their own lives because they are in the correct mental state. Autonomy is when someone is able to make decisions for themselves, and if they believe that a mental illness is impairing someone's autonomy, they will simply not give them the right to take their own lives. But giving someone the right who is in a correct state, who has full autonomy, should be completely legal. In its most basic state, euthanasia is the desire for people to have a good death and to end their lives on good terms, rather than suffering the last few months of their lives, which is exactly what pet owners do to their dying animals. When a family pet is on its last legs, brave families are able to make the decision to give their animals a last good few moments and bring them to their local veterinary office and to be euthanized. The stigma that's put on the word euthanasia is simply hearsay, because the Greek definition of the word euthanasia is good, EU, and death, thanatos. The last few moments that a pet lives through is simply them being put to sleep, where they fall asleep into an unconscious state, where their heart rate lowers extremely low, and then it spikes extremely fast until they pass away. They don't feel any pain, they're just asleep for the entire process. This is a very difficult decision for a lot of pet owners, and it is often looked good upon for those pet owners who are able to make that decision. So why is it so bad for it to be made for people? I previously state how the legalization of euthanasia would only help the people whose lives are put in such a low quality of life that they can end it and have a good few last months and last few memories. Using the euthanasia on animals in the decision of Vacco v. Quill of 1997 and capital punishment, I argued that euthanasia should be legal in all states upon strict guidelines. For all those who have been convinced by my statement and thinking that it's helpful, physician-assisted suicide is affected at the state level, and people who can give their voice are able to make drives to push them towards legalizing in different states. And once it's illegal in most states, the federal government might be able to make it nationwide. Euthanasia is a concept to help people finish their lives in a peaceful way. Without it, the government is able to decide when we die and how we die and what nature, and takes away our right to a peaceful death.